Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the It's Bigger Than Me podcast. I do this every time. Every time we before we start rolling, I'm like, why didn't we start rolling? Like, this is gold. I cannot wait to introduce John to you. John, you're gonna have to say your last name because I feel like I'm gonna butcher it. Is it Cerrone or Cerrone?
Cerrone.
I'm like, I probably should have asked that before, but I was like, let me just double check before I butcher it. So there you go. You get it live, raw and real. I am so excited to be able to connect with you today because we've been following each other on social media for a number of years. But recently there was a post that we reconnected on, and I'll bring it up a little bit later. But it has to do with leadership and the arrows that come with leadership. And then John and I just got digging into this rabbit hole of leadership and just what the Lord's doing. And again, we should have started rolling before we started because it was absolute gold. But before we really jump into that topic, John, I would love for you to be able to build some context of who you are, how you've become the person you are today. Your story is so incredible. And then, of course, we see Limitless Nation all over you. So, where did that come from? I'd love for you to just kind of build in just who you are so people can get to know you on that level too.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate being here and you inviting me to be on the podcast. My name is John Cerrone. I'm from the Chicagoland area. I'm a performance and results coach. I enjoy personal development. I'm obsessed with it. And that's my goal, is to help people perform and get results in mindset, fitness, business, and relationships. A little bit of a background about me is I grew up like a troubled youth, got in some trouble when I was younger. I ended up going to prison for dealing manufacturing cocaine in 2008. And after that, I ended up getting to this place in my life where I said, okay, like, I don't belong here. I need to choose another route. This ain't it, and I had no guidance. I didn't have a dad around. I kind of ran free. It's kind of like having like a 3-year-old mind and a 25-year-old body, running around in the streets, just doing whatever I wanted. And at the time too, I think it's important to note that like spiritually, like, I wasn't connected to God in any way. Like, I was raised Catholic. I've had a few people try to save me, a few Christian friends, and I went through the ropes of that, and I was like, okay, cool. And it was nothing for me. Like, at that time, I think the best way to describe it, and I used to say it all the time, was like, like, God is just like the Santa Claus for adults. Like, I don't get it. I can't connect with it. Like, when people say they talk to God, like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, people are just making this up. It makes no sense. And I continued down this path of destruction. And I got to this point where I said, okay, cool. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore. They were trying to put me away for a long time. And I was like, this is just not the way. This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I know it's not what I'm supposed to be doing. The conversations that I'm hearing from the jail cell, like, these are not my people. I'm not supposed to be this person. Like, these guys are coming in with a diploma in whatever crime they committed, and they're trying to leave with a PhD how to do it better. I'm like, this ain't it. So I started my own business. I turned $236 into almost $400,000 in about 3 years' time. And I came to social media looking for somebody to teach me how to do it. I was like, I'm an idiot from the streets. Like, I'm doing the right thing. I'm trying to be a good dude, and I need to learn how to really run this business. And I found myself telling my story on social media, which made me start trending on an app called Periscope. And from there, it led me to getting on stage for the first time with Les Brown. People asking, like, literally asking me, begging me to stop my general contracting business to get into Limitless and make this my thing and help people. One guy came to me and said, you're going to keep getting punished by God if you don't seek this out, if you keep ignoring God and what he's trying to tell you. And remember, like, I was not at this place yet. He was like, he's going to keep punishing you unless you do what you're called to do. You should be building people, not houses. And that was it for me. Like, at that time, I was burning everything down, trying to keep my business alive while Limitless was thriving without me trying. And years come by now, and now I'm coaching, speaking, out here doing the best that I can to make people's lives better.
I love that. I need to be out here building people, not houses. Come on. That was a bar right there. I love that. I love being able to build in the context. And I always have my guests share their story because you do it so much better. But then I also get to listen and glean in and just see the different aspects. There were so many reasons as to why you could have just been shut down. But you had those, you went down paths that weren't necessarily the best, right? But then
Yeah.
the Lord was able to highlight, even though you didn't believe in him back then, he was able to highlight, like, hey, we're not going here, and there's something so much more. And I love part of the conversation I know we want to have today is, what social media has been used for, and now what it's turning into. Now, this may be your feed, my feed, person listening or watching this might be like, that needs to be my feed. But now it's actually turning into the sharing of the story so much more rather than some big pitch fest. It's like, let's get in and share the story. Sure, we all have back end things that we want to lead people to because we're obsessed. It's our mantle, it's all the things. But I love the story aspect. So let's expand on the Periscope thing for a bit. You mentioned to me before we jumped on, when you started that, you had like a 4 hour commute, I think, like, whatever, going somewhere. And so you're like, I'm just going to go live and I'm going to share. Might as well just get in there and share that story. As you were doing that, as you were sharing, a lot of people, a lot of hangups. I've been a speaker coach for a very long time, and people are like, what do I say? What do I do? What are people going to think? Like, what was going through your mind of like, click, go live? Let me just start sharing. I would love to kind of hear that if we can backtrack to that space a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to say this was 2015 when I did this. So at the time, like I didn't have social media like that. Like I had Facebook with like 8 friends from school, and then Periscope, which was something new to me. And I spent a lot of time there watching other successful people give advice and do this stuff. And as I'm commenting, what I resonate with or what I'm doing, people started following me from those comments. Like they saw value in just my comments. And one night I was driving from Kentucky back up to Chicago. I had like 4 hours to go, and I was looking at my phone, and like nobody was live. Like there's nobody for me to listen to. Like I was kind of like addicted to like listening to personal development. And at that time, I didn't even know what personal development even was. Like I just knew that like these people had information and I needed it. So I looked at it and I said, what, I got like 50 something followers. I'm going to hit live and see if maybe somebody shows up. We can hang out, And then, 2 people were in there, and one of them was like, dude, who are you? And what's your story? I don't even know why I'm following you. And I was like, well, I got 4 hours if you got some time. And I spent literally 4 hours like giving my story. Because at the time I was like, I don't have anything to lose. Like these people don't know me. And if they hate me for who I am, I don't care. And I told them everything because I was ashamed of like my past and the things that I did, and me going to prison for dealing drugs and like all this stuff. Like, and it's not an excuse that what I was doing, but I found my own way back then at 14, 15 years old. Like I didn't have a dad around. I sought out to go and look and find what a man's supposed to be. I know example, my mom worked her butt off. So like she worked 3 jobs at one point. Like I was on my own and I made all those bad decisions, but I can't take any of that back. But by sharing my story, by the end of that stream, I had like over 2,500 people watching, listening to my story. And it like completely flipped the switch in my head about the belief of myself, the belief of how people perceive me, the things that are possible. Like by me sharing this, I had people start emailing me and saying, hey, thank you for sharing that. Like I was in a dark place, I didn't feel good about myself, like you helped me get out of this pit, out of this box. And it just grew from there. Like people started requesting by email. Literally, they would email me like, hey, when are you going live again? And I'm like, I'm not. And they're like, no, you have to. And like it just started evolving from there.
Wow, that is so good. There's a route that I really want to go, and I hope that we have enough time if you have a little extra time, because I mean, who knows? We free flow with this podcast, and I was like, you know what? I didn't anticipate this, but this is such a heavy topic that I'm like, to have a man on the show to say, you didn't have that fatherly influence, that the world basically was fathering you. Your mother was working her butt off, 3 jobs, doing everything that she needed to do. And basically the world was teaching you, and you got caught up in a few things. I want to really touch on, if you're cool to go this direction of, that male influence. Oh, I'm already getting chills. I know that there's such a huge lack in there. The Lord's revealed that to me. My husband and I talk about it all the time. I listen to the men that he pours into, because men are hungry, they're thirsty, and they're being taught by the world and getting caught up in these things. And so I would love for you to kind of expand on that, because I bet you that part really resonated with people of like, dude, me too. And so I would love for you to expand on what that was like and then what you've seen now, like what you're doing now. Cause I am sure just being the man that you are, you're coming in to fill that gap and you've done a really great job because you see that there's a need, there's a void that has been there. So I would love for you to rip on that.
Yeah, that's a painful process, I'll tell you, for kids and young men. I can't speak for young ladies, but I'm sure it's something similar in many aspects. But it's a painful process, you know, like at that age. And I'll speak on my own experience, and I'm sure that people can resonate with some of this. But like it was a painful process, you know, like as you know, being probably 8 to 12 years old. I spent most of that time trying to figure out what I did to make my dad not want to be around me, you know, and like there was none of that guidance. There was none of that, no connection, no like that, like at that age, like young boys start looking for, okay, like, you know, when you're super young, it's easy for young boys or young girls to want to be around their mom. Like they're nurturing, they're caring, they're compassionate, they'll take care of you because you need to be taken care of. But at a certain point, the switch is flipped, and like you're like, okay, so like there's things I can't ask mom that I need to know, like what's happening right now, and he's not there. So I had to go find those answers on my own. I had to go look and seek for these things. And you know, like in the area that I grew up in and the people that I was around, like it wasn't like I was like in some third world country, but like it wasn't the greatest either. Like there was lots of bad people around me, I've hung out with every single gang you could probably think of. I'm from the Chicagoland area. I've never joined a gang, but I was friends with all of them. And one would see me with another gang and they'd beat me up for it. And another one would see me with another gang, they'd beat me up for it. And like the crazy part of it was is all these kids that I'm hanging out with, they were just my friends from elementary. So now they all split up to different gangs, and I'm just bouncing around trying to find some kind of acceptance, like who will take me in, like which one am I going to hang out with? I'm not joining them. And that's what it was. Like I started hanging around GDs here, disciple gangsters here near the Chicagoland area, and they're predominantly black gang. Like it was weird because I was called the crazy white boy. They didn't have any white friends around them, and it led me down this path because like I finally felt accepted. I finally felt like cool. I have guidance. It was the worst guidance. It was the worst people I could be around. It was the worst environment, the worst place for a young man to learn. But I didn't care because like I was trying to feed that need.
Gosh, there is so much in there. And thank you so much for like going down that route because you never know when you ask something like that. Like I can only imagine how painful that is. And I've heard similar stories of just a parent was missing, or maybe even a dad or a parent was in the home, but just totally not there at the same time, right? Like physically present, but that was it. Like there was nothing there. And I know that that impacts so much. And so I had this phrase that popped into my head and I had to write it down of basically you were taught in the streets, like you went to go figure it out. You were taught in the streets, and now you're teaching people to really be limitless and having that behavior and having that mentality. And you just kind of started just going down that path. Now, you did mention earlier that you kept saying no, no, no until some guy, and you weren't really following the Lord or really believing at this point. He's like, you better start following that. Otherwise, it's going to be painful. And, or the Lord will just move on to somebody else if you keep saying no to that. I would love for you to
Yeah.
go down that rabbit hole now of from being taught in the streets, now being helping to tell people like with this limitless mentality, like that switch of like, you know what? I can't keep avoiding this anymore. I got to stop, building houses and I need to build people. I would love to like build that bridge there.
Yeah, so it ties into like what we just ended off on as far as like looking for influence, looking for leadership, like who like lead me, where am I supposed to go? And you know, looking back on things, all the things that I've spent the last almost 2 decades working on has to do with leadership. It has to do with mindset. It has to do with fitness. It has to do with business. It has to do with relationships and networking, because those were all the things that I was lacking my whole life. Like I didn't have that. And those are literally the pillars of like what people are and what creates good people and what creates good relationships and a good community and a good family. And like I was just so obsessed with it I was never a big reader. You could probably tell by my past that like you show me a book, I'll burn it. Like I'll keep warm by it. Like I'm not gonna read it. And now I'm obsessed with it. Like psychology, neuropsychology, neuroscience, neuroplasticity, human behavior. Like I could read that and learn about that for the next 10,000 years and not get tired of it. Like I just can't get enough of it. And it boils down to like the leadership thing, and it's the post that you and I connected on that brought this podcast together was, it's important for people to understand that like people who lead, they're just human beings. Like they need a hey, good job too sometimes, or hey, how you doing, or check on them. They're just human beings. They might have it together. And it goes back to what we talked about social media. Like from 2012 to 2017, 18, everybody had the perfect life. Everybody's got beautiful cars, beautiful houses, beautiful relationships. But in reality, that's not what was going on behind the scenes. That was just a trend that people wanted to jump on. And they think by doing that, it made leaders look bulletproof. It made them look like they're some superhuman, but that's not the truth. That's not the reality of it. Like by leading, you're taking on a huge responsibility for yourself and for those that are under you. And the crazy thing about it is that like I was watching a video by Jordan Peterson, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, because I always heard people say like, hey, God told me to do this, or God said to do this, or this is the way God wants me to go. And I used to be like, what are you talking about? Like, do you got this dude's phone number? Like, did you guys meet up at the park? Like, what happened? Like, I'm logical and analytical. So like, I always threw that to the side. Like, you just want attention. I don't know what you're talking about, but I listen to Jordan Peterson say, your conscience is God talking to you. And it flipped a switch in my head, because when I sat back and thought analytically and logically about it, when I was if God is real, so is the devil. And when I thought back to when I shoved God out of the picture, when I refused it, when I said, okay, I don't see any evidence here, let me put the adult Santa Claus to the side here, because this doesn't make sense. I thought about it and I was like, yeah, because the voice in my head at that time is what led me to the streets and led me to dig deeper and led me to get in trouble and led me down this bad path, leading, right? Like it's leading me to this place. And when I gave up that idea and I started just to flirt with the idea of God and flirt with this thing, like it was just like neon signs everywhere, everything unfolding. The more I fought it, the more things burned down. The more that I just allowed it, the more things grew and prospered, and which led to this here with me and you. So the leadership thing is vital. It's important. Like somebody has to lead, somebody has to play that role and be the example. And because of my past and not having that example, I made it my duty, my job, my everyday obsession to learn how to lead the right way and what are the right things to do. Breaking it down, I mean, like when I think about it, I think of like, what did humans do 500, 1,000 years ago? What were they doing then? Because we have so many easy buttons and deceptions and manipulation and fake stuff around us. Like it's hard to navigate that today, thinking of today, right? But what did we do back then? Because we weren't so civil, it wasn't so beautiful. It was very black and white, clear, cut and dry. This is what the direction to go. So that's what helped me with the leadership part of it.
Oh gosh, that is so good. And even just to build in context, because I was digging in of like, okay, what post is he talking about? And so I wanted to bring this up just so you can get context. That's something that I'm obsessed about. People need more context. If they had more context, then they can actually make a clear decision or really have that understanding, right? But it was this post here. And if you're watching, you can see it. If you're listening, I'm going to read it. Everyone sees the leader everyone sees the leader that what they want. Sorry, let me like repeat that. Everyone sees the leader and what it is that they want, but they don't see what the back looks like. Arrows that are sticking out from hateful words spoken over them, from the enemy trying to take them out, from the world trying to distract them from their purpose, and so much more. The scars may be hidden, but the battle to get there and what they have and where they are today will never be forgotten. The next time you see a leader you admire, thank them for what they went through and for the inspiration they are to you. It will go further than you know. Leadership is a weighty call. And standing in the gap isn't for everyone. It will cost you dearly, but the reward of being in your purpose is always worth it. I stumbled across that, or I stumbled in that a little bit because I'm like, wow, there's a bunch of spelling errors in there. You got to love it when you're just downloading something live. I'm like, does that even make sense? But what I was sharing with John is when I put that post up, it was one of those downloads that I got in my quiet time of like, I just saw arrows, I saw leaders, I saw pioneers, people who go before, because it's a weighty call. Everybody wants the glory, quote unquote, in leadership. They want the spotlight, they want the stage. That's what they think it is, and it's not. It's being a servant. It's getting hit. It's being cut down. It's being, like raked over the coals. It's a lot of things that people don't talk about, but people need to talk more about because it really is something so much deeper. I mean, we see it in scripture all the time. It's like you are going to die to self and you are going to be a servant to others. One of the things in my quiet time that I like to dig into is I have a Bible dictionary to like dig deeper on words. And if you look up the word leadership or even the word serve, both of those are pages on pages on pages of the different aspects, what they mean, scripture to match it, all of that, to build in more context of how weighty that is. And serving and leadership go hand in hand. It's not about you, it's about what you can do for others. And I'm seeing, and I'm sure you are too, seeing more people rise up and really step into that. And people are sniffing out the fakes of like, yeah, I don't really know. And that's the company that me and my partners built back in 2020 called Girl Power Alliance. And we just launched a men's division called Real Men Alliance. Is quite literally the premise of being able to have men and women grow personally, professionally with a financial opportunity and this done for you membership where they can learn in a variety of different ways through whether it's on demand, live calls, certifications to really pour into elevate them. But God's at the center of it, the foundation from the people that you learn from. He's not edged out. We're not manipulating. This is how we're pouring in and serving, so then we can go make disciples and we can go be the salt and light out in the world. Not getting trained by the world in the new age, in the manipulation, in the FOMO and the scare tactics. It's truly serving with our gift. And so that post is really like that premise of when you see somebody you admire, some of the first things that people will do being like, oh, must be nice. Everything looks good. Looks great to me. And it's like, get context. Step a day in my shoes or even ask, like, how did you get here? Get that context. Start reverse engineering how somebody got to that place. And that's why I love bringing people on the show because in a sense, we're reverse engineering. Yes, here's where they are now. Looks great. But you didn't start there. There's so much that you had to endure and go through and really painful moments from childhood on to be the person that you are at this point. And that's something I really admire about you, John, because it's like you could have ended up getting your PhD in jail. How can you go be a better crook, right? Like you're talking about with these guys, which is so crazy to think about. Like you were locked up behind bars and you have no freedom and you want to go out just to try to be a smarter way to do it again. Like that's mind blowing. But we're not criminals. So, obviously it doesn't make sense to us. But I love being able to bring people on the show like you because we're all in this together. We're in this for a bigger impact beyond us to help people break through. In your words, limitless of really being able to show people there's so much more. And that's literally even the title of my show. It's bigger than me. Everything that we do, it's so much bigger than us. Everything has a ripple effect from you getting, put into prison because of the cocaine that you sold, from you not having a father when you grew up, from just different things. It all builds into that character that God's been able to use to now impact people, I'm sure, all over the world. So I don't know if there's anything that you want to say on that, but I definitely had to say that piece. That was brewing. That was inside of me right there.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that post that you made was on purpose. Like, and I think I responded and we connected on purpose for that, like for myself, and the things that I do and the way that I look at leading. Like I coach my son's football team. I'm a leader for Limitless Nation. It used to be called Limitless Legends. And, as far as like supporting leaders, I think it's super important, right? Like, I don't think that enough leaders, and I'm not saying that, leaders need pats on the back, but when you genuinely see something and you're like, hey man, like that was pretty cool. Like, it's nice to hear. We're humans too. But at the same time, it comes down to like the bullying part of it, because and I guess I don't want to throw that word around loosely, but I don't think there's any other way to say it, as like when a leader is out doing something or they have the what's the word I'm looking for? They just have the ability to say something that somebody else will not say. And then they're shunned for it, or it's different, or it's this or that. Like there's
Mhm.
like a huge, like big movement right now on social media of influencers, if that's what you want to call it, posting advice about making someone's life better and then turning around and posting about, hey, these gurus are clowns. Like there's a thing there that's happening that um is it's the one day they're gonna have to pay the piper for what's going on. You know, like they used to say when I was younger, mind your business. And they said that for a reason, right? Like people have opinions, they start saying this, they say that, and all of a sudden, like you become this bad person, you know. And I say that because it's happened to me. I say that because, you know, for me, my life's a digital billboard. You can go on YouTube, you can go on Facebook, you can go on Instagram, and if you went through every single video I ever put up, you'll never find anything that about my life that I didn't talk about. Everything is there. No one will ever come to me and be like, aha, I found this about you. Like I've put everything out there, but people like to bend and twist and move things around. And you're damaging a leader that are leading other people because now they're doubtful. You're damaging the reputation. You're damaging what they've been building. You're doing a lot of damage. And a lot of times the people that do that are people that aren't building anything. You know, like they're people that are out there with just this poaching, malicious intent to just go out and be that person for the day. So I think it's important that we do get that support, you know, for leaders. It's the crown's heavy. It's not easy. It's not something that, you know, people come to me like, I want to coach, I want to speak. I'm like, do you really think so? Like, you know, like you said, step in my shoes for a day. But I think what it comes down to too is like, I've sat and like broke this down and thought about this, and I like to make things simple, right? Like when things are complicated and you make things complicated and you try to come up with this MC squared equation, like it's not going to play out. But if you can break it down, like for me, I can break this down easy by going back 500, 1,000 years, thinking of men and women, excuse me. And you know, you think of men and women and what are their roles, right? Like, because this is what it's going to come down to. Why my dad wasn't around. So what was his role? Why wasn't he fulfilling the role, right? What are their roles? When men fulfill their roles, like to produce, provide, protect, the women can fall back into their role and be nurturing and caring and compassionate. Men can teach loyalty and respect. Women can teach love and compassion. Like they fill their natural roles. And I'm not saying that women can't lead. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is like they tend to work together naturally because those roles unfolded naturally. When you take one of those roles away, then the woman has to take on this masculine role and the feminine role and roll with both of them. That's something that my mom had to do, right? And vice versa. You know, that's why today it's probably not going to be something popular what I'm going to say right now, but you'll see like a lot of beta males, a lot of dad bods, a lot of low testosterone, a lot of women wearing the pants instead of the men, you know, and it's something
Mhm.
that men and women are kind of victim to because of the social conditioning of the things around us. What's trendy? What's this? What's that? Keep eating processed foods, keep doing this, keep doing that. And like you're just weakening the species of people and putting them in this place where there is no leader. Like it, you know, back at you know, 20, 30 years ago for me, there was a different reason for the lack of leadership. And today it's just grooming the population to not lead, to not be able to fulfill their duties, and for people to be confused. And you'll start seeing that in many different ways with children now in schools and things. Like I don't know how deep you want to go into that conversation, but I'm sure you know where I'm leading with that. But you know, I think it comes down to the man and woman, you know, what are their roles, and it leads into relationship for me because, you know, like you think of like a man and woman getting married, and what are their vows, right? Like they vow to be together. Whatever happens with me, whatever happens with you, we agree we're not going to run away from each other. We're in this. And when you have that stability there, it's concrete, it's 100% trustable that they can be together. Both people can play their roles, both people can lead in different ways, and that creates the foundation for the storms and the weathers that will come later. Because I think that for me, by my observation, what I've been learning and paying attention to in my own experience, like for me, I have a hard time accepting gifts. I have a hard time accepting love. I have a hard time accepting compassion. I have a hard time um being having somebody tell me I did a good job, right? And it comes back to like what my foundation of trust is, because I didn't have that trust. Like my dad's supposed to be here, he's not, so I don't trust that somebody's going to stay, right? But for me, knowing that if there's a concrete vow together that you're going to stay together no matter what, that unleashes a beast in me that I can say I don't have to worry about this person running away. Whatever we face, we'll be able to do this together.
Oh my gosh, there's so many gems in there. Yeah, you're like, I don't know where you want to go. I'll go wherever. I mean, there's so much truth in all of that. And this could be a whole series as far as beta males and alpha females. Like it is something that has been, I mean, something brewing on my mind for a long time. And me being an alpha male because of how I wasn't able to trust men. Great father, he didn't do anything wrong. But then I saw my mom, my dad was an alcoholic for a number of years. So my mom kind of took control because my dad's issue. When my dad stopped drinking, obviously things, kind of started to even out. But by then it was already ingrained in me of like, if you got to do it, go get it done. And that's been a blessing in a lot of regards, but goodness gracious, also just a train wreck and other things when it comes to dating and just what I've had to learn and, being married and all those other things. But being a driver, alpha female, my gosh, like there are a lot of those times where I have to play both of those roles, and not anything against my husband whatsoever. It's just because I've been doing it for so long of like, well, wait, let's backtrack. And that was actually something that recently I had in my quiet time of like, Lord, like map out these roles for me. Like, here's what the world says, but what do you say? And then I'll even throw it out there. I believe a lot of women expect things out of their man, out of their husband, that they need to go to the Lord for. And they put so much pressure on their husband. It's like, you actually need to go to the Lord for that. He is, anyways, not that the husband's not supposed to be the provider, the protector, all of those things. But there's so much depth to it that we get caught up in what society says. But we need to understand those roles. And then biblically, what are those roles? And then understanding people are flawed. They have traumas. They have different things that have come into the person that they are now. And if we can give that space for an open conversation, healing different things. My husband and I are very open as far as what we talk about in our marriage. We talk about a lot. I pretty much fire hose him daily of here's all the things, babe. Let's get into it, right? Because I want to be able to like just dig in deeper. So I love that you went there because there is an epidemic happening. There are, sorry guys, and maybe the men listening, you're not this, but there are a lot of men out there that need guidance, need mentorship, that are beta because they haven't had that role. And then you see a woman that can step in and do it. Can she? Yes. And we see a lot of alpha females step in and do it. But is that her role? And then you want her to be nurturing, loving, all the things that a woman should be, but then she has to provide, protect, like, come on, make it make sense. So I feel like we got to have you back on the show to really dig into that, because that is something that is that is gold. That is something that has been on my heart for a very long time to be able to kind of go back and forth with somebody on, because it is an epidemic, period. And then we won't go super deep into it just time wise, but like, just what are children seeing? What are they learning? No wonder they're confused. Period. We're just going to leave it at that. Like you dig into your family dynamics and be like, are you making it confusing for your kids or not? Are you letting the world teach your kids or not? So anyways, yeah, we could really like rip in onto that one, but I also wanted to create a space. Obviously, if there's anything else you want to say on that, feel free. But you even said before the podcast started, and I know sometimes I just drill people with questions because I'm an inquisitive person. There were things that you mentioned. You're like, I want to be able to ask you a few things and whatnot. So if there's anything that you want to ask and you want to be able to share back and forth and have that conversation, I want to make sure that we have the space for that, because you asked for it and I heard you. And I also know how I am, where I can just get in there and ask a bunch of questions.
Yeah, definitely. No, I super appreciate this. I think that, based off of what I see from you from social media, what your beliefs are, your values are, and your direction with God, and the direction with your life and the things that are going on. I think that there's like a big message that needs to be put out about like communication and relationships and things like that, because that's where it all starts from, is like at home, right? Like, so for kids, it's going to start from at home. For business, it's going to start from at home. Like the conversations and the way we communicate and how deep we communicate and who we become at home is going to be how we show up at work, how we show up in our business, how we show up for other people, how we lead other people, right? Like I think that a lot of people, in my experience, like they go to they go to work and they run a management position. Like that's all that is to them. That, okay, I got these guidelines. This is the job today. Go, like, but I think that you are at this place similar to where I am, that I think that the message should be out about like how we communicate and things that we do. Like, are there things that you do in your relationship with your husband that you don't see a lot of or hear a lot of, like on social media? Like for me, one of the biggest things for me is like, I enjoy speaking my truth, and I will choose that over somebody's feelings. I'll choose that over, confrontation. I'll choose that over everything, because if I'm quiet, then they don't know. And if I do that 10,000 times, eventually I'm going to be up to here with it. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of relationships get to that point because they don't have the hard conversations. They don't have the accountability, call each other out, praise each other, get those deep connections with each other, understand that at the bottom of this thing, no matter what happens, it's temporary. You might be upset with me, I might be upset with you, it'll blow over in a day or something, but we're not running away from each other. Like, do you guys have anything like that with your relationship?
Yes, there is I love this question so much because there's a depth that I feel like a lot of people don't get to. They'll just be like, "Ooh, confrontation, I want to leave." My husband definitely does not like confrontation, so he likes to retreat and think. And I'm like, "Let's get in there and let's fix it and let's run at it." Like, because this is where the division and the wedge comes in, right? Now we've learned more of our communication styles and styles of how we need to think about what we want to say. For me, I'm just gonna like let it out. For him, he wants to kind of like think of all angles. So there's two different brains there, right? Like the way that we think. But then I got to a point where my discernment started to get so high of, you know what, I'm not fighting you. I'm fighting the thing that's trying to come against us in our marriage. I'm not actually fighting you. Like,
Yeah.
let's get real. And when you get to call that out, being like, that can leave, goodbye. Like, then you can stop and you could be like, all right, like, I love this person. Yes, we think differently. Yes, there's flaws and there's other things that we've had to work through. But that communication line is so open no matter what. It's like, because I don't want the wedge to come in, especially in kingdom marriages and kingdom relationships. There is going to be wedges by all means. Plus, what my husband and I both do, very kingdom based. We're both entrepreneurs. Like, there's so many different aspects where it is definitely a harder route for sure. Communication has to be number one. And then also recognizing, wait a second, like, I'm not actually fighting you. There's something deeper, and actually being able to see that deeper thing, because you have to be you got to get out of your own way first and see that person from a lens of compassion and grace, just like God does. Of, there's a hurt there, there's a trauma there, there's a stronghold there. And we get to rebuke that first. And then when we rewind, then we can actually address, what is it really? Because what
Mm-hmm.
just happened here was like, yeah, that's not it. Or if there's a repeating pattern, like whatever, but there's something so much deeper. So let's go to the root. But this is what it all comes back to. You got to take the time to do it. You got to be intentional. And a lot of people do not take the time. Oh, I'm tired. I got this, I got that. They're prioritizing everything else outside of this gift called marriage, a relationship that we're so hot to trot to get in there and get our person. And then it's like, oh, okay, cool. That thing doesn't grow itself. That thing doesn't work itself out. You got to
Yep.
actively nurture, love, repair, mend, pray over, fill in the rest. So I know it's a long, deep answer for that question, but it's so much like, you got to be intentional. You got to take the time to communicate and look at it in a deeper lens. You just have to.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. I appreciate that. I think I see like a movement of that coming soon. Like I've noticed a lot of people starting to, like I said before, it was like the perfect social media, and I'm starting to see more and more leaders come forward and be like, nah, like this is the reality of it,
Yes.
and at the core of that, not just in like a relationship with your spouse, but in life, the more that you can speak that truth, whatever that might be, even if your voice squeaks, say it, because that's going to lead to the actual reality. If by holding it in, it's a form of lying. and it creates a false reality. Because if I said something, we probably wouldn't go this direction. We would go this direction. But because I didn't, now we're over here. And this isn't real, because if I say something, we're going to go back over here. So I think that that's like a huge thing, you know, and I look forward to, you know, maybe jumping on some other podcasts later or diving into certain specific topics or whatever. Like, I think this is interesting. I think it's powerful. I think it's something that needs to be done. And the more the people that are leading, that have a voice, need to speak up and show what's real, because there's people out here that are struggling, suffering, going through things, thinking this is the end. I can't do this. Like, there's so many male suicides. Like, it is insane the things that are going on, because they believe life is this beautiful thing for all these people. But let's talk about the real stuff. You know, yes. I think that's where the gold is. That's where people will grow themselves and become better people.
That's so good. There are so many golden gems in this podcast. I'm like, we could easily, on any direction that we went, go like an hour. And I'm like, we're gonna put a pin in this, because you're definitely coming back on the show, and there's enough good meat for somebody to at least chew on. Of wow, what resonated, what popped out, because there's so many different directions. And I'm just grateful for you to come on the show and just be able to share raw, openly, and just be able to give us the truth, because people need it. You know, they need that truth. They need it in love, but they need to know, like, look, like, there's changes are going to have to be made. You know, not everybody, like you said, is this perfect patty on social media. And we're seeing more of these like real, raw, authentic people. And still, there's so many more people that aren't doing that. But imagine if you did. Imagine if you shared your raw truth, what breakthrough that will bring for you and for other people that are supposed to hear your story. I say this all the time. Your story is meant to be mentorship to somebody else. Somebody is going through things that you've gone through, and they need to hear that you came out on the other side, what you learned, to give them some wisdom and insight. That's not just for us to harbor. So I appreciate you, John, for coming in and giving us your wisdom and your insight with everything that you have. And you guys will be able to learn more about what, you know, John's about, how to connect with him in the show notes. But is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I would say the one thing I would like to close with and say, because this kind of goes across the board with everything, is, you know, like, when I'm sure we've all heard it before, when people say, hey, like, don't take life so serious because we're not going to get out alive. I think that's probably one of the biggest excuses that I've ever heard. I mean, I used to say it myself. I used to believe it, you know, and I think it's one of the excuses we make to hide from the direction that we need to go to make our lives better. Because the people that are saying that, I promise you, they're not in a good place. I promise you, they're avoiding something. I promise you, they're struggling with something. And that's what they say to make themselves feel better. I would say just do the opposite. You know, I would take life serious. I would be extreme about what I do with my mind, my body, my business, my family. You are the one that's going to carry on the lineage, your family, your name, what you become, what your kids will become. And if you're suffering now and you keep this mentality, your kids will too. So go out there and have some fun, dive into this stuff, and go through life like you should. Feel this stuff, go through this stuff, grow through this stuff, and become your best self. You are limitless.
I love that. Yeah. Steward what you've been given. Steward what you've been given, like that, like, just marinate on that. So John, thank you so much for coming on. For everybody that's listening, thank you so much. If you got some value out of this, definitely, like, you're going to have all the ways to connect with John in the show notes. Share this on social media. Share this with a friend that needs it. I can guarantee you probably know at least 10 to 20 people that need something that was mentioned in this, because these are all very, very hot topics, and topics that people want to dive in on. They just need that spark of a conversation. So thank you for coming on here and helping light some sparks so it can turn into a wildfire of change. And we will see you all on the next show. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. It means the world to me that you would lean in, listen in, and be able to hear the value that's being shared on this show. Don't forget, if you love this episode, rate the show, leave me a review, be sure to share it with a friend, and don't forget to tag me on social media. I will definitely be giving you a shout out. Also, come say hi, drop in the DMs. I would love to be able to hear what stood out to you the most on the episode, and if there's any topics that you would like to hear on the show. We'll see you next time.